Call to order the regular board meeting for Pleasantdale School District 107 Board of Education at 6:01 p.m. on January 15th, 2025. Can we please get a roll call? Mr. Bracco? Mrs. Lindsay? Here. Mr. Nash?
Here.
Mrs. Walters? Here. Mr. Zona?
Here.
Mr. Mason?
Here.
Mrs. Marchion? Here.
All right, jump into the pledge. All right, so tonight we have members of the cast for our spring musical that's coming up in March. This year, the middle school will present Annie. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Arundel to introduce our cast members and kick off the meeting. So, Janine, the floor is yours.
All right, so we are really fortunate to have some fabulous actors here with us tonight. We have Patrick Corey, who will be playing the role of Warbucks. He's a fifth grader with us this year. And then we have Amelia Zavala, who will be playing the role of Lily.
Hi.
Lily, who is the one who pretends to be Annie's mom.
Yeah.
And we have Kyle Zavala, who will be playing July, who is one of the orphans in the orphanage. So students work really hard. They have to audition for these roles. They're selected. They have to learn their lines. They have to learn the dances and their everything. So they work really hard at what they do. And from seeing the last two shows, it is a fabulous day at the theater. So I would encourage you to come with your family. It's a very family-friendly show. Bring them over and they will have a great time watching the cast of Annie Jr. So this time, come on up. And we're going to recite the pledge. And we'll give you a...
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Congratulations, you guys, and I am sure that at Pleasantdale Middle School, it's never a hard knock life. So. I think it's a bad joke. Good job.
You want to take a quick picture?
Picture? I think it was Patrick was in this?
Perfect.
Okay, Brad boards?
Yes. The first grade completed their unit on the development of early civilizations with a focus on Mesopotamia and Egypt, and yet that is first grade. They spent time learning about the significance of the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx. Students created 3D models and shared important facts about each of them. We have some pictures of our first graders with their work on our brag board, so check them out if you have some time. It's a really great project and activity for our elementary school students.
Next we'll move on to item 3, open forum. Do we have anyone that wanted to approach the board tonight? We'll move on to item 4, the consent agenda. So item 4A, approve the regular meeting minutes of the December 18th, 2024 meeting. 4B, approve closed session minutes of the December 18th, 2024 meeting. 4C, approve payment of the November payroll and December warrants. And Charles was our checker this month. Anything to report?
No questions.
Okay, perfect. Item 4D, approve students section 7 and community relations section 8 board policies. 4E, approve registration fees for the 2025-26 school year. 4F, approve fiscal year 2026 school calendar. 4G, approve the December 2024 personnel report.
Sorry.
Oh, 25. No, December 2024.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right, January 2025. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, it says December. Okay, January 2025 personnel report. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bracco?
Yes.
Mrs. Lenzen? Yes. Mr. Nash?
Yes.
Mrs. Walters? Yes. Mr. Zona?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Marchion? Yes. Next, we'll move into item 5, administrative reports.
All right, we'll start with facilities development. So this is a monthly item on our agenda. Throughout the past few months, the board has discussed ways to address the 3 recommendations by our community engagement committee, and then which have also been added to our strategic roadmap. These recommendations include expanding our early childhood program, creating a developmentally appropriate space for 5th grade, and enhancing safety at our schools. We also discussed the need to address current space issues at our schools and prepare for potential enrollment increases. The solution that's been discussed is to occupy and renovate the Burridge Village Hall to serve as an early childhood center. We have Elizabeth Hennessy from Raymond James here to provide some funding options for this project. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you with maybe a little bit of assistance from Griff.
Great. Thank you for having me tonight. It's been a while since I've been here. So what I'm going to do tonight is kind of just go over, thank you, the bond market and some of the projects you're looking to do and some financing options. So as we go, please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions, and Griffin and I will try to answer them. All right, so starting with the market update, I apologize, things are happening so fast in our market. This is already dated, but this kind of harkens back to December when we had our last rate cut by the Federal Reserve Board of 25 basis points, which was expected and was great, but the language they used led us to believe, and investors to believe, that there will probably be many fewer rate cuts in 2025, perhaps one now looking as late as October for that. Since then, we've had the employment rate come in hot last Friday, and we had CPI today, which came in at 2.9, which is pretty much in line with expectations, maybe a little higher. That's an important number because that's going to set your levy for the 25 levy year. But the month-over-month increase was not as high as I thought it would be. So that was good news. So you saw the stock market rally a bit and our bond market rally. Because since December, with the different expectation about Fed rate cuts, we've had interest rates creep up again. So it's a bit of a volatile time. So here's more or less where we are today. This is what we call the yield curve for the AAA Municipal Market Data Index. What that is, it represents tax-exempt bond rates for AAA rated bonds. It's an index that's priced every day. And the dark line shows the yield on every point of the yield curve starting in year 1 and going through year 30, the average over the last 30 years. The red line is where we are now. So this shows us that short-term rates are still elevated, but once you get past year 7, the interest rates that we're dealing with today are less than the 30-year historical average. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about some new legislation, which is very favorable to Illinois school districts. It allows fire prevention, safety, environmental protection, school security, and energy conservation bonds, known as life safety bonds, to be issued outside of the tax limitation law. So if we hearken back to the last time we issued bonds, they were working cash bonds to be used for capital projects, but the payments were limited by the tax cap, the debt service extension base. So the payments couldn't go over a certain dollar amount. So each time you issue those bonds, it's an extension of that same payment. It's not really an increase. But now life safety bonds, which used to be subject to that cap, are now outside of it. So you can view them like, for example, a new issue referendum bond. They are paid from the bond and interest fund. They do not impact your operating funds at all, but they are going to increase taxes a little bit depending on how you pay them back. Not subject to the tax cap. Other things that happen, voter-approved bonds that are not subject, voter-approved bonds are now not subject to the debt limit, and the max repayment for all bonds has been extended to 30 years from 20 years. And then the last one is kind of relevant to you guys as you look at your early childhood center. So it says voter approval is not required for a new building if it increases space for new pre-K or kindergarten facilities. Now, it does not include any funding, but of course the life safety bonds is a type of funding, if that is helpful as you look at this new site. So that's great news as you kind of consider this new opportunity. So the statutory debt limit for the district is strong at $51.6 million. That's part of the state statute. Very low debt. You only have $2.1 million of principal amount of bonds outstanding. Then we look at the statutory debt limit for working cash bonds, and that's 22 million. So really low debt, great opportunities, flexibility. Okay, so here's your outstanding debt service and tax rate. And if we start on the left side, we've got levy year, then we've got your EAV, which we haven't assumed any increases in the future. Then we have that debt service extension base. That's the thing that was part of the tax cap. Going back to the year 1994, when tax caps came to Cook County, the district had a levy on that was really, back then, I actually was around back then, believe it or not. It was about 200,000, 250, something like that, very low. And then in 2009, they added CPI to that, so it increased year over year. And here we're looking at 24, that amount is 400,282, representing a 3.4 CPI increase over the prior year. Again, we just found out today, 2.9 is our number for 25, so that will impact next year. We assumed 2.5%, after that, 2%. We go across to the next column, we have non-referendum total DSEB debt service, DSEB debt service extension-based debt service. So those payments are limited to the amount of that debt service extension base. So those bonds are those working cash bonds we did a few years ago, and you can see those are getting paid off really quick in 2029, 7 years out. And then if you look at the remaining DSEB capacity column, that represents the difference between the debt service extension base and the payments on those non-referendum bonds. So it shows you really don't have a lot of capacity there until the year 2029.
Well,
So,
I
yes.
have a question. So our prior bonds are under working cash, and these would be under fire prevention, or under life safety. Why would we, how does like a school improvement fall under life safety bonds?
Well, life safety bonds can only be used for specific projects that qualify for these fire prevention and safety. And they take your architect to put together life safety amendments, and then they're reviewed by your intermediate service center, or what used to be the ROE. Yeah. And then that goes down to Illinois State Board of Education, where they have a separate department that reviews them as health life safety. Typical things include HVAC replacement, roofs, security cameras,
Fire alarms, elevators, sprinkler systems, smoke detectors, emergency lights, all sorts of those
Right,
sorts
so
of
just a
projects.
portion, so the entire project wouldn't be
No.
under life
Correct.
safety. Got it,
Correct.
okay,
Just a
all right,
portion.
I was like, how?
And that's why, as you'll see later in the presentation,
I see, okay,
Um,
all right.
you'll see portions of it broken down that we would try to pay for a portion of it with life safety.
Okay.
And that's an estimate at this point, because we're still very early in those phases, but
Yeah.
we've asked designers of the future building potentially, how much do we think it would be? Around 2 million is what they've indicated.
Got it.
So we're
Thank you.
kind of splitting up the buckets for how we're proposing to fund it.
Okay, got it,
Okay,
thank you, yeah.
great question. And I just want to point out one more thing on this one. So the bold numbers, the non-referendum total DSEB that Elizabeth was talking about, those numbers, we've already taken that money. That's the money where we got 2.7 million in 2022. And we used on the roof over here and the HVAC over at the elementary school. We're kind of finishing those projects, obviously finished those projects. So now we're gonna pay for those projects over the next few years by paying off those bonds. But in 2029, we have the opportunity to reissue those bonds and collect some more money if we wanted to, which we'll get to kind of at the end. That could give us some flexibility in our funding structure, but not kind of handcuff or force anything on future boards. So, go
Just
ahead.
because we're on the D side.
Yeah.
Is there anything that would impact the availability of those funds to us? Like, is there any risk, basically, of
Great
relying
question.
on that?
well, I guess there's always legislative risk. I don't see that really as a big threat. The biggest thing is the interest rates. Because the higher the interest rates, the lower amount of principal you're gonna get out of that same limited payment structure. So when interest rates are low, you get a lot more principal out than when they're high. So I think that's our biggest risk going forward.
And again, full transparency, when we decided to take those, it did increase taxes a very small amount. So I guess one other thing that could happen, a future board could decide not to take those. It would lower taxes a little bit, but we would lose out on that money that can be used to continue to upgrade and update our facilities.
Any other questions? This is just a graphic. The green bars are the payments on that outstanding 2.7 million. And then the line is that debt service extension-based limitation. And you can see there's a little bit of room under that 2029. But that amount is a small amount. It was a gamble, you know, whatever you had on the books in 1994 became that debt base. So that's one funding source. Okay, so now moving into financing options. Dave introduced the opportunity to purchase the Village Hall in Burr Ridge and convert it to a pre-K early childhood services center. Preliminary cost estimate, $12 million. So the district can afford about $1 to $2 million in fund balance reserves comfortably and stay within your fund balance targets. You also may issue what's called general obligation alternate bonds. Those are payable from the operating fund, so can be paid with things like O&M fund property tax revenues, evidence-based funding, corporate personal property taxes, interest earnings, or a combination of those sources. So the alternate bond debt service payments must be budgeted for annually. So as we talk about this, we look very carefully at the district's operating budgets and its projections to make sure it's a comfortable thing for you to budget and isn't going to impinge on your operating budget too much. So these bonds may be paid off over up to 40 years. They do have a property tax backup levy that is abated annually. So from an investor point of view, you're getting not only the pledged revenue of the operating funds, but also that backup property tax as a security. So each year, as your budget makes room for the payment on the bonds, and you are abate or remove the tax levy. So from a taxpayer point of view, there is no increase in taxes from these type of bonds. Alternate bonds require authorizing resolution of the board, a petition period, following publication in a local newspaper, and a public hearing. These are the same kind of things we did for that 2.7 million working cash bond. And then the other thing to mention, we are just touched on this, that the debt base is not available for additional working cash bonds until 2029, but you may issue life safety bonds outside of the debt service extension base to make life safety improvements to the building as necessary.
And so, go back one second,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Liz. That second to last bullet was what I was saying before, that in 2029, we could reissue those working cash bonds for, it'll be about $3 million because of inflation. We did 2.77 years ago, about $3 million. And then we could utilize that money to refinance our bonds or do some other, pay it off early, do some other things. But nothing would be set in stone at this point. We just know that we've got a little bit of a backup coming, so it makes it feel a little bit safer in that respect. If we didn't do that and didn't use it that way, you know, that's where we've been looking at our 5-year facilities plan and thinking, what are the next big projects? There aren't humongous projects that are coming. You know, there's a couple of rooftop units still that we need to do and other things. So we would look to see, do we need to use that money to do these future facilities, or could we do that refinancing? And another 7 years after that, so around 2036, we are going to be looking at a roof at the elementary school, and it would make a lot of sense to have that money available at that point. So we're in good shape and have some good flexibility there.
Can I ask a question? If this is going to be answered later, you just feel free to defer me. we're saying here that, the payments obviously have to be budgeted for annually, so with respect to our budget, are we seeing any other budget areas that are gonna be kind of need to be adjusted as a result of that?
That's a great question. No, nothing that needs to really be adjusted per se.
Okay.
For these last 3 years that I've been in this role, I've been moving $600,000 from O&M to capital projects as we've been supplementing the working cash bonds that we sold. And we've been able, and you'll hear from the auditor later this evening, but we've been able to maintain very much a balanced budget or close to a balanced budget while pulling that money out, which is why you'll see the payments that I was working with Liz on was to get them below that 600,000 level. So if we continue, now there are many unknowns going forward, I need to say that up front, many unknowns, but yes, based on the last 3 years and even looking back at like the last 7 or 8 years, yeah, you'll see these funding options. I feel very comfortable with both of them.
Here, and I'm sorry if this is small, hopefully you guys can see it or have it on your
Now you guys
screen.
want to sit over here.
Amen.
This is just kind of a spreadsheet on borrowing options for school districts. Under the yellow headings, we've got bonds that are paid from the bond and interest fund levy. So those are paid directly by property taxes, do not take away at all from the operating funds. So school building bonds, which are required to be approved by referendum, that's the first one. The next is working cash fund bonds. So those also are paid from property taxes, but and are subject to the petition period and public hearing. Life safety bonds, those are paid from that separate property tax levy as we were just discussing, and require life safety amendments and approvals and a public hearing. Funding bonds, those can pay claims or debt certificates or alternate bonds if it were the case. So as we go through here, when you look at these alternate bonds, just, Griffin and Dave and I always talk about, well, what if something goes wrong? What's a relief valve? Funding bonds could be a relief valve if you got pinched in the operating funds in such a way that that $500,000 or whatever you decide to spend is not comfortable anymore. You could refund some of those bonds with funding bonds and put them on the debt service extension base. So that would be limited, but that's some of the options that we were looking at. Toward immunity bonds, those can only be used for the case of a lawsuit, very rare. Then paid from operating funds, the 3 types we have are debt certificates, lease certificates, and alternate bonds. So none of those are subject to referendum. All of them must be used for capital projects. The alternate bonds is the only one that has the double-barreled feature, meaning it's got the tax levy that we have paid every year. And we're recommending that right now, just because it is a more secure type of bond and investors will pay a higher price, lower yield for those in most cases. Okay, so the 2 options we're going to talk about tonight both fund the $12 million for the Early Childhood Center, and each option has a multiple different revenues pledged to it. So we're not doing all life safety bonds, all alternate bonds, all fund balance, we're doing a combination. And option 1 looks at using $2 million of your fund balance, $8 million alternate bonds, and $2 million of life safety bonds. And option 2 is just $1 million fund balance, $9 million alternate bonds, and $2 million life safety bonds. So we're going to look at the impact on the taxpayers and on the district's current and future financial situation under these 2 options. There's obviously lots more, but we thought this would be a great starting point. Okay, so option 1, $12 million is the estimated cost. We're using $2 million fund balance, $8 million alternate bonds, and $2 million life safety bonds. So sorry again, the print is small. Here is the $8 million general obligation alternate bonds. They are repaid over 25 years, and they are, the estimated interest rate is 4.44% at your AA1 bond rating. The annual payments in this option are estimated at $532,000 a year. So it's a level debt service. Again, alternate bonds, something you put in your annual budget each year, that 532. Second, we've got life safety bonds, 2 million. What we're showing you is 10, 15, and 20-year payback options here. Now these bonds, again, outside of the D-sub, they are a tax increase. If we pay them off over 10 years, the all-in true interest cost is 3.78%, and the increase on the tax rate is 3 cents for $49 for the owner of a $500,000 market value home. Okay, if you remember your current bond and interest rate back on those old slides, it's 5 cents. It's very low compared to other school districts. So this adds 3 cents to that, and those are the impacts. If we pay these back over 10 years, the impact is 2 cents or $35 for that $500,000 market value home.
15 years for that one.
15, did I say?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
And 20 years for the third option, 2 cents or $29 for the home. Personally, we like the 10-year option only because it does coordinate with a 10-year life safety survey. You've probably heard Dave and Griffin talk about that. Every 10 years, you have to put a report together for the State Board of Education that reviews all your health and life safety needs, and they're categorized into A, B, and C projects, and that's required to be submitted every 10 years, and bonds is a way you could fund some of those as well as your operating funds. So that's why 10 years kind of makes sense to me at least, but you certainly could pay them off over a longer period of time.
And then the amounts listed in the 3 columns above, those would be like the annual repayment amount?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Are these also budgeted for annually?
Yeah,
Well,
so now what, we're at 797 that we
Yeah,
would
the
need?
difference with these is these are gonna increase the levy. So when we say that we're gonna levy 2.9% next year, then we also have a debt service levy, which is why our levy, 2.9% plus new construction. But then in addition to that, there's debt service, and so it's a little bit more than 2.9 or even 3.3 or whatever is what we end up getting, because there's some debt service that's being levied for. So right now, we're levying for a payment in the 300,000 range for our DSEP from
Oh,
2022.
Yeah.
So it's a because it's spread out across all of the taxpayers, it is a tax increase, but it's a small tax increase because it's a small amount, 2.7 million. This would be for 2 million more on that, and so it would be estimated at $49 for a $500,000 home each year, to be transparent and clear.
In addition to the bonds that we have
In
from
addition to the
2022
bonds that we
and
already
then
have from
the original.
2022, that are going to come off in 2029. And that payment could go down, we could reissue it and get that money and use it for projects, or we could reissue it and refinance these bonds and get a lower payment or make some adjustments there.
Sorry if I missed it, but the 2 million in life safety, is that a natural cap, or is that just a number that you guys use as a placeholder?
Yeah, that's a number we've asked the companies that have put together ideas at this point for the potential new building.
So that jives with the cost, how the
So
breakdown
if
of
the
the items.
total
that we can-
cost is about 11 million or so, 12, and then 2 million can qualify, we think, it actually may be 1.7 million. And then we'd have to make some adjustments with the bonds, but, I mean, we gotta keep talking about it with the generality still at this point.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but this is a really, I think, a really good example of what it could
So
be.
the bond amount can be adjusted, or is it,
Oh, yeah.
it's
This is
pretty
just the
flexible?
estimate.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, now these do count against your debt limit, but if you recall, that was like 51 million, so you know where you're at. It's just what qualifies for health, life, safety,
And then what that total is becomes the
and the
actual, yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm envisioning, is whatever the kind of almost the max or up to 2 million that we can use in life safety, we would use. And then the remainder we would fund with the alternate revenue bonds. If it's 1.7 and 8.3, then it is. And then we'd use some fund
And
balance
then depending on how we choose
to offset some of that and you guys and a few previous boards have been good stewards. We have the rainy day fund, we feel comfortable with it. We can use part of that too, so everybody's got a little bit of interest in the situation from a funding perspective. This is option one, and
Oops,
then
sorry. Oops. I went crazy. Sorry. All right,
right here. So,
go ahead.
No, you,
This is yours.
all right, this is my slide. I got one. So this is our assumption here again, 2 million with a use of fund balance, 8 million with the alternate bonds, and then life safety bonds. Remember, they don't impact the operating funds. This is my forecasting software, putting in best guess forecasts, and also with the payment in there, and potential new staff for a new building, kind of an all-in sort of best guess what I would envision our future funds to look like. And as many of you remember seeing 5-year projections in the past, like when you get towards the 4th and 5th year, oftentimes you're kind of sliding down. This is it's a slight decrease, it's a slight deficit, but feel very comfortable with the trajectory of that line. The blue line going up, it says plot area, I don't know why it says that, but that is our 50% expenses line. So the board's policy wants to complete each fiscal year with a fund balance that is at or above the 50% line. So that's what that looks like with this option here. And I like this one. I think because of the lower payments, the 532 is lower of the two options. It does get our fund balance a little closer to that line, but it also, the reason it does really is because we're taking 2 million out of fund balance, because we're recognizing that the fund balance is good.
And to reiterate, that 50% number is one that we self-imposed as a board, right? The Illinois law statute is much lower than that, right?
Yeah, I don't even.
There's
yeah.
actually not even a law,
I didn't
but
think there was.
ISB has a recommendation on their
recommendation,
financial profile for a minimum of 25%.
25%.
So theoretically, if we pulled that down, we're, you know,
Theoretically, you could adjust that line if you felt comfortable doing that, or future boards could as well. Yeah. Personally, I mean, without making major adjustments to what we're doing, I don't think we're going to even be
right, but
that
there is-
close.
but there is-
there's flexibility
Okay,
there
yeah.
from
Thank
the
you.
board's perspective with
Thank you.
their policy, yes, with your policy. Okay, so that's one good option.
Here's option 2. The difference here, we're using only 1 million of fund balance and 9 million of alternate revenue source bonds. We're still doing the 2 million life safety bonds. So in this option, the difference is because we're issuing 9 million instead of 8 million, the payments are 598,000 per year. Okay, again, 25-year repayment.
sorry, the 4.44 number you're using was in both scenarios, right? How, I mean, I know the bond markets are all over the place, but how realistic is that cost of capital for 4.4? Meaning,
It's in a range. It's gonna be, you know.
Right, but
We
if
did
it's-
this a
right.
week ago and the market's up.
Right.
If I had a crystal ball, I wish I had a crystal ball. But I think this is.
But if we're turning to a higher interest rate environment, that we should be real, that could be 4.7, it could be 5, it could be, so
It
then
could.
our payments are gonna be significant, would potentially be much higher, right?
They would be higher. I don't know how much higher. I mean, we're paying them off over 25
Right,
years.
so it's,
The interest cost, you know, it does add up over time, but, you know, 25 years is kind of a long period of time, but it matches the life of these
Right,
facilities.
so
You know,
it
so many
smooths out- it smooths
facilities
out any
go
of
for
yeah.
30, 40 years. But I think we could have some variability. I mean,
Right, I
you know, the Fed's supposed to be bringing down rates as CPI comes down. If CPI does a U-turn because of tariffs or whatever, we're gonna have a different situation.
Which again would impact the levy, right? If CPI were higher than the 2% projected, or as you had in the, yeah.
Yes, it would. So that is where these
It's
bonds
all-
are being
you're
paid
right.
from, so that is hopefully somewhat of an offset.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Here's the life safety bonds. Again, this is exactly the same slide you just saw. So this option, this part of the option is identical. 10, 15, and 20-year paybacks and the various impacts on the home. And then here's the operating fund projections, and they're a little different. So again, I'll turn it over to Brooke.
Yeah, so this is what I was saying with 1 million less in fund balance. With this projection, we're talking about 66,000 more a year in payments. So it's gonna take you time to catch up to that $1 million that you're not putting in. So you see a wider gap between your 50% line. And in the end, your fund balance at the end of 5 years, all the same projections, is a bit higher.
But we're burning the extra 66,000.
But we're burning the extra 66,000, yeah.
And this is 5 years, and it goes 20.
Would the extra assets in the fund balance also show some growth in there as well?
They will?
So then that would kind of, not let's say, well, it's not going to offset it, but it would kind of minimize the
No, but if we're earning 4% on $1 million extra that we didn't put into the project right away, yeah, you're talking about $40,000 each
It's
year.
close to offsetting the
Each year going forward,
additional
depending
interest.
on where rates are.
depending on where rates go. But if we're talking about rates could go up, then the money that's in the bank, that's going to be helpful for
Interest
rates
payments
going
are
up.
higher, but the 1 year.
Yes, and each December, or each January, like today, we got the CPI number of 2.9 for next year's levy. Next January, we'll get that next one. If rates go down, which, as a human being, taxpayer living in the world, I want the rates to go down, I want things to go down. But when they go up, from a school district's
There is some
perspective,
benefit.
yeah, there's some positives with interest income, potential levy ability.
That's a good point. And it's really a play between short-term investment rates, which have been high over these last 11 rate increases, has really pushed up the short end of the yield curve, which you saw in that earlier slide. As that comes down, your ability to earn interest, because your investments have to be somewhat short-term, right? Because you're a school district and you've got taxes coming in twice a year, but you've got to pay expenses every month, so you need to keep that mostly liquid. So that relationship is very good right now, and has been for the last year, could change in the future.
Yeah, so I think, again, this is a great option as well. So the largest differences are, and we'll have a chart with the synopsis, but the payment difference, and then where you end up with a fund balance in 5 years. But to your point, this is going to go out 25 years.
So here's the summary, just side by side. You can see that option 1 with the 8 million alternate bonds has a lower annual payment, $532, versus option 2 of $598. The life safety bond options, we put the 10-year in there. Again, we're kind of recommending the 10-year, but we're open to whatever the board would like to see. Again, we're just showing you options here. That's the 10-year, that's a 3-cent increase with a $49 increase on the home. And then the important point being that the debt service extension base is open for you at 29 for the next capital investment in the district. And then the impact of each of these options on the operating fund. So option 1, we're looking at the fiscal year 2030 fund balance. It's lower in option 1 because, again, we're taking it down, the fund balance down by $2 million right now to invest in the equity in the building. In option 2, we're only taking $1 million down now, so it's higher after 5 years. But if we go out 20 years or 25 years, I would probably imagine that the fund balance, all things equal, would be lower in option 2. But we cannot project 25 years of operations, for sure.
Can I, so the 12 million, that's specific to the purchase and renovation of Burr Ridge, and doesn't include anything happening at elementary, middle, in terms of, I know in like the broader scope of the project, we talked about STEM labs and like building out additional classroom spaces. And so this might just be a takeaway, I think, probably, is like, can we see how, at some point, how that would fit in, like what that would look like, what would that do to our budget, and how if would it fit into these bonds, or would we consider that for these bonds as well?
It's a great question. what I priced out was taking the estimates from the companies talking about the building,
Right.
the acquisition of the land, the renovation, the extension of the village hall.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna look at Liz for a second, but if we wanted to come up with an alternative that would do, you know, figure out how much those additional projects that I am very interested in as well, would cost, could we add another $1 million to alternative bonds or $2 million to alternative bonds to do something like this? And instead of financing 12 million, we're looking at 14 million, say. I'm just
Right.
making a number
Yeah,
now
exactly.
to meet your question. Is that
Yeah.
kind of what you're
Exactly, yeah.
saying?
Right.
Yeah, at this point, we were looking at
No,
the
agreed.
village hall.
Yeah, and that's why I said it's
And I
probably a
think that's-
takeaway, just
Yeah.
thinking while, you know, kind of drinking from the fire hose a little bit here, so
Totally,
just
totally.
talking out loud a little bit, but
No,
yeah,
I
so
think-
that'd be something I'd be curious, because I mean, I think that was like the ultimate goal of, you know, is
Right.
trying to get the fifth graders to the elementary and then making those spaces available for them, as well as, you know, the other grades as well, those STEM labs and things like that, so like, just want, you know, see the bigger picture of like, how could we
Yeah.
also make sure that that's, you know, budgeted and where does
I
that
don't
fall
want to put you on
in
the
here?
spot, but is
No,
that
yeah.
a way that you would recommend potentially, or was there
Yeah,
another?
well, again, it's, you know, those projects would all be new money, right?
Mhm.
There's no life safety or anything involved there.
Probably not much.
Okay. So it would be an alternate bond, I mean, just going from 8 million to 9 million over 25 years, your payment increases about $70,000. So if we went from, you know, 8 million to 10 million, and if 2 million took care of some of those wonderful projects you're looking at, you know,
Roughly
maybe
$70
we're at
$70 per
yeah,
year.
65 or something like that per year, which sounds not too far from the amount you transfer each year for capital projects, but
That's
we
not
have to
bad.
look at it carefully within budget constraints and
Mhm.
then also think, what about using some more fund balance, Griffin?
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, like,
Yeah.
you know, if we use more from our fund balance, then we wouldn't be paying back 5 million in interest. Like, what would that look like if we were able to use more from our fund?
That's a great question. I think the two reasons why, and I ran some scenarios just offline, and Dave, feel free to jump in, but a couple things happened. One, we crossed that 50% line sooner with the projections, because obviously the fund balance starts off down, and if you start trending down at all, you're gonna cross that line out at 5-6 years. Another thought that, I'm always thinking about, okay, the money well, we've talked about the rainy day fund in the past, because we had late taxes a couple times, and we've had that conversation at this table, where we needed, and some of our neighboring districts had to dip into some pretty expensive short-term borrowing in order to just make payroll. So we're really want to make sure we have some money there. I'd say the third one that I haven't really talked about before is, you know, if taxes are on time, in between those fall and spring taxes, we dip down $4 or $5, almost $6 million just to do payrolls in our our regular operating. You may have looked at the monthly report right now. We're at $3.7 million deficit. I'm not nervous about that because I know the taxes are coming in, but we can't dip too far here. Like, somebody might look at this and say, oh, go down halfway, that'd be great. If we go down halfway, we may be close to not have enough money to make payroll at some point. But to your point, could we look at a 3 million or a 4 million? We can look at that scenario for sure.
But you wouldn't feel comfortable, like 2 would be the max you'd feel comfortable.
Well, but also it's partly to meet that ratio that we've self-imposed, right, of 50%.
Correct.
Which, so we could theoretically, as a board, draw that number, bring that number down, which would allow us a little more flexibility
Correct.
on that, yeah.
But without changing policy, yeah,
No,
I
right.
understand that, but without changing our policy.
So without changing, like, I ran a $4 million scenario because I was thinking, oh, I want, like, I thought of it like my home, right? Like, I want to pay less interest, I want to
More principal.
get as much principal out as possible and make that happen. And what I saw was, because you drop it down right away, I crossed that blue line before 5 years. And so then I was like, oh, let me try 3. And it was higher. And I was like, oh, let me try 2. And it's higher. And 1, as you saw, is even higher. But you're financing more money over time, and we're paying more interest over time. Full disclosure, transparency. I mean, these are the these are the options that we want to give you so that you can discuss it as a board and then kind of take our recommendation and or suggest what we should be doing going forward.
Under any scenario, all these scenarios, we're still talking about $49 on a $500,000 home.
Correct,
In terms of
for the
to
life safety.
To the taxpayer.
Correct.
And
The rest of it is operating funds that, you know, again, many unknowns coming up and moving forward, but we've been good stewards of where we're at, and you know, we've been transferring 600,000. I feel comfortable that we could do around a $600,000 payment without having to do anything differently than what we're doing. And we're always looking at ways to be more efficient with our funding as well. Dr. Belzette and I had that conversation recently too about looking at our operating spending per pupil and trying to find some areas that we can, that won't impact learning, won't impact achievement, won't impact kids, teachers, principals, but maybe we can be a little bit more efficient with our funds. Now that I'm 3 years in, I really feel like I've got a much better eye on what's happening across the district and where we're spending money and what impacts kids and what doesn't really impact kids, and should we be spending that money in that way.
So then the alternate bonds also have a levy, but it's abated at the end of the year, or when does that happen?
Yeah.
At the end of the year.
The end of the year.
And what's the rate then that it's initially levied?
So
Just the exact payments that you see in each of these options. So, for example, in option 1, the levy would go on for close to $532,000 or whatever it turns out to be, and that would not increase taxes because it would never be extended.
right.
And all these levies go on the tax rolls when the bonds close, and then each year, when you pay it from your operating fund, you peel that levy off. By
And so just to be
resolution.
clear though, the taxpayer doesn't pay that and then get a refund, so to
I see.
speak, an abatement. It doesn't happen.
Okay.
It never goes out.
It's a great question. It's
It's
a
just an
nuanced
accounting
part.
trick.
It's
There's
an
no
accounting.
money in, money out.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
again,
But-
so
but
if I'm
the-
Joe taxpayer in our
Right, that's what I was, I didn't want them
district,
to be out that money.
Exactly.
No.
No, that's a great point.
if we do this project, whatever option we choose, it's $49 per 500,000. There's no additional.
There's no additional, no. I
Well,
mean,
that's
it-
just in tax rates. I mean, we're still paying back the interest of $5 million over time.
Yes.
Over time,
Right,
yes.
there,
Which we
we're
would
just
do
talking
under-
the
yeah.
$49, just the interest on that,
What we're already talking,
yeah.
Yes.
no matter what the scenario is, right?
Yes, for both of these proposed scenarios, if we can utilize up to $2 million of life safety bonds.
And that
which is
number
what
goes
we've been-
down if we use less than, if we
Yes.
qualify for less.
Yeah,
than
we
that,
only
obviously.
qualify for 1.7 million, it won't be
It's
$49,
42
it'll
or
be
43 or whatever.
$42 or whatever for the 10-year. And if that 49 scares you, I mean, we can push it out to 15 or 20, I agree, we just submitted our life safety for 10 years, we can easily do amendments to it, but then in 10 years, we're gonna need to do this, this whole thing again, so, we'll review everything again, so we really do like the 10-year, but if you'd rather have the payment be, you know, I think the lowest one was $29, like, then push it out to 20 years, and we go from there.
At what point do you apply for the life safety, I don't know if apply is the right
Yeah.
word, but because, for example, if they came back and said, oh, only 1 million,
Mhm.
that's gonna start driving up all the, you know, the general bond, and again, then our payment amounts and interest and all that, so like, where does that come in the process that we would know, okay, this is what we could get for this project?
Yeah,
Or do
I
we-
mean,
is that something-
I can answer, I mean, my best answer, and I looked at Dave a little bit because he's
Yeah.
had some of the conversations, but, we would need to really be moving forward with the
Early
project.
on. So to answer your
Like early
question,
on.
as soon as possible. Like as soon as we felt comfortable with whatever, if we felt comfortable with a certain funding option and we wanted to move forward with it, that's when we would start working with either our architect or a contractor and start figuring out which parts of the project qualify, how much those cost, start
Write the
making amendments,
amendments,
write the
submit
amendments,
the
get it
amendments.
submitted, so we have that number, a harder number on it.
And does that process commit us to the life safety bonds, or are we allowed to say we're getting 1.4 and it's not enough, we don't want to pursue this anymore? Like,
Yeah,
are we?
it doesn't
obligated?
commit us to any. No.
Good question.
The
That's a
only
great
thing the
question.
life safety approvals do commit you to is doing those life safety projects.
Once we've been extended Right.
once yeah, I
Once
mean,
you've been
so.
approved.
Well,
and extended
well,
for
right,
sure.
but we could choose to not
No, I-
take those funds
Yeah.
once we
Yes, the
apply for them.
funds, yes. I think this, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to tell the state, oh, wait, we're not gonna actually do this project, but
Oh, yeah.
that's what I'm saying,
Just
though,
trying to
is that,
figure out
like,
how long, the multifaceted approach we're taking.
If we
What
would
step-
decide
At
to
what
do
point
the-
are we in?
right, if we would decide to do the project and kind of say, we're gonna do the project pending all of these things line up, like, you approve, we're going forward with this, then we start the amendments, we do that. Liz is working on what are the actual interest rates right now. We get that submitted, but it can take multiple months to get life
3
safety stuff.
months.
2-3
Which
months,
is actually another good question.
once it's
So,
approved,
again, this is
or once
cart-
it's
this is
submitted.
cart before the horse, but assuming we choose option 1 or option 2 or option 7,
Sure.
when are those funds available to us to be used?
Well,
X plus how many months?
you have to go through some of those procedures, especially on the alternate bonds, which include the public hearing. And you've got the life safety bond approval process, then you have a public hearing for that. You have the petition period. So if everything is perfect, 3 months,
3 board meetings.
more likely,
6.
yeah, 3 board meetings, 3 or 4 months is what
Yeah.
I'd say.
No, I mean-
Before you get
So
the
when
money
in,
and ready
like,
to
that
go.
we can do, okay,
Yep.
all right.
I think it's probably safe to say that the life safety kind of portion of this project would exceed 2 million. Or is that like?
It's hard to say.
Like,
It's
what,
hard
I
to
guess
say.
what my concern would be is like, we kind of budget a number and then we take that to go get approved for the bonds. And then when, we open the bidding process and it comes in much higher and we could have secured more, like, I guess,
Yeah.
that's where the timeline questions are coming into my head. Like, how does that,
I think these are, again, because these are estimates, there's quite a bit of flexibility there.
Yeah.
So again, we've got to plug some numbers in in order to give you guys and the administration an idea of how to move forward. So again, these are numbers that we feel comfortable with, but they're still just placeholders, right? So as we start to dig into this, you're right, it may be 2.4 million or 2.1 million or 3 million. We're not real sure. 2 million feels comfortable based on what we're hearing from architects and contractors. But again, until they really get in and say, okay, this portion of the HVAC system, needs to be replaced, or these windows need to be replaced, or this, portion of the project qualifies for life safety
Right.
and prices it out, it's kind of hard for us to.
Yep. Is there a cap on that, life safety? No, okay.
Just your debt limit. But the thing is,
Not for us.
like,
Which is
let's say,
55 million.
yeah.
Oh, it is
Right.
51 million, okay,
Right.
sorry.
Not for us.
So let's say you're comfortable with the $49 and the life safety numbers come back at 3 million. Well, we can go 12 years and get it back down to $49. So I think we have flexibility.
Yeah. Or you could say, well, let's just do 2 million of it in life safety and we'll still do this and this, even though we
Even if it's
could
3
qualify
million,
for
it'll
3
qualify,
million.
right, yeah.
I think, yeah, if it came in under, that would be where we'd have to look at adding to the alternate revenue bonds and adding to the payment amount and running another scenario and making sure we all feel comfortable that instead of 532 or 598, we're at 650. Are we comfortable with 650? Or if we add the other projects potentially, are we comfortable with 700? And what does that look like to our budget and does that impact anything?
Would either of these funding options impact our bond rating as a district at all, like lower it?
You'd have to go back and get a bond rating, but you have such low debt out right now, the additional debt would not have a negative impact on the bond rating. And based on your operations, you've been very stable since your last bond issue, I don't see any threat. And if you recall, you are AA1, which is 1 notch below the very highest rating. It's a really good rating for a district as small as you guys.
Any more
Anything
slides?
else? Or do I? No?
No,
Just
just
a-
a display.
I want to talk about small funds.
Give it exactly, we need small spots of-
Just wanted to make sure you got the disclaimer out there. That was for you.
I thought that was the quote.
That's our quote today, from Raymond James, some guy back in the day. Do you have any other questions?
1,000, but thank you, it's very helpful. Yeah.
We're not
It's a
liable.
lot to think about.
Last questions, Dave's well versed in this, happy to talk
And as we
through.
work through this and consider different options and numbers, we can bring those to you with, and you can kind of adjust these.
Yep, we can adjust this and bring it back to you, or whatever we need to do. And I'll dive in a little bit more to that life safety process so that I'm 100% clear on it. I know it's gonna take some time,
Or
but
what the actual.
when we can do it, I mean, if we can kind of get it, yeah.
A soft quote kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
it's
almost
hard,
like-
it's hard, because they're gonna wanna know
Right.
exactly what sprinkler system you're doing and how much it costs, and then approve it. I mean, it's very specific when you do it. So, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thanks, guys.
Next, we'll move on to 5B, school safety report.
All right, as part of our ongoing safety initiative, the district drafts a safety plan based on a safety audit from a third-party safety consultant. Our safety consultant issues a report with recommendations, and those recommendations are considered by a committee that helps draft a safety plan. Tonight, I'll provide the board with an update on our progress in implementing that safety plan. So just give me 1 second to get to the podium here. Yes, please. Thank you. All right. So this is an annual report that we do for you guys, and just start with a little bit of background. You know, safety is obviously our top priority, and we're constantly, like, you know, kind of my tagline, I've used this for different things, curriculum, but safety is the other one. Like, safety is like laundry, it's never done. So you're kind of continuing to always make upgrades and improvements. And we've really developed a nice structure around that. So we've now had 3 years of multi-year safety plans. I'm sorry, this is, the third year of our multi-year safety plan. This one spans from 22 to 25, so we're finishing it up right now. Again, it's developed based on best practices, but we do make adjustments as new information becomes available. We're not so rigid to the plan that if there's something that we can do to improve safety that we learn, and that this is on another slide, but we learned from an unfortunate incident somewhere else in the country, we don't say, oh, well, we're gonna have to wait 3 years until it's time for our safety plan to be re-upped. We make those changes if we feel that they're going to improve the safety of our school. So again, that's that third bullet there. Just a little bit background on the process, because it's been a few years, and I think, Becky, you were on our safety committee last time around. So it's an inclusive process. We have a third-party consultant. I have a slide dedicated to him and some of his work next. Comes in, reviews our building, does walkthroughs, kind of looks at our plans, looks at our processes. He does a secret shopper too, where he tries to get into the building. So he'll come in the middle of the day and kind of knock on a window and see if somebody lets him in, or knock on a door and see if somebody lets him in, and kind of stress test some of our systems and structures. He then produces a report. We take that report and we bring it to a committee where we have parents, teachers, staff, board members, administration. We have the Park District as a part of this group last time because they use our buildings often. We use their buildings. And we do have students. And the reason that we bring this committee together to review the plan is that we also take feedback from the committee. So what is your lived experience in our schools? Secretaries are a really good gauge of some things that we could be doing differently because they are kind of the eyes and ears of the buildings, right? Having kids there also gives us a really great, like, oh, there are some issues with cracks in the cement that we didn't realize, or things like that that help us to modify our plan. Any questions so far? Feel free to interrupt as I go. Again, a little bit about Paul Tim. This is the gentleman that does our safety audit. He's worked with us for the last 3 plans, every plan that we put together. He literally wrote the book on school safety, and then he also comes in and helps lead that task force, that committee that puts the plan together. So he's kind of, he's a really knowledgeable person to come in and help us with this. Now, what we do then is we take the suggestions, the administrative team goes back and breaks those suggestions up into 3-year chunks. And the reason that we do it that way is that, one, we're able to spread out costs and trainings and things like that over time, so it's not too overwhelming, and we try and do, obviously, the highest priority changes first. I'm going to show you some tables, and I had a hard time kind of figuring out where to put this in, but there are 3, it's color-coded. There's green, means it's complete, we've done that thing, whatever that task is. Yellow means it's in progress. Red means it's not complete, and then I added blue to one, which is no longer applicable, and I'll explain that when I get to that. So again, in 2021, 22, here are some of the projects that we've completed. One of the things that is red on here is that fencing for a detention area at the elementary school. And when we originally put this plan together, we knew that there was going to be kind of this detention area. There's going to be some construction on this detention area. They're putting some below ground reservoir, what do they call them, detention areas where they're storing the water below ground. And the worry was we're going to get some heavy rains and it's going to fill up with water and it's kind of going to be an attractive nuisance. Horrible if a kid were to tumble down in there. So over time, what we found is that the underground tanks that they put are fine. They can handle all of the water. Even during heavy rains, we didn't see any water kind of pooling in that area. So we held off on the fencing. We're going to continue to monitor it. If we find that that area is filling up with water, we can always fence around that detention area. But we didn't feel that it's necessary to, it wasn't a necessary expense at that time because it wasn't filling with water. And, and then you have the issue of we've got a mow in there and, now you got to fence it. Like it just, actually what we thought would have created more problems and solve a problem that wasn't a problem. But again,
Isn't that area used?
What's that?
Isn't that area used outside?
And it is
for,
used
like,
outside
field
for
day
PE when it's not, because it's not like super low. So yes, they'll use it for soccer and things like that. And it could still be used for that with a fence. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to do that. But again, just a few things that we did back in 2021. There was some significant vegetation in front of the middle school. We cut out, like you couldn't see when you were coming around the corner. It was brutal. So I got rid of all that and put up some lower shrubs. We have our panic buttons tested regularly, and also the panic buttons that we have that the secretaries have under their desks. And then just, again, some other, I won't read through them because you're familiar with them. In 22, 23, we finally got that flashing beacon put in. It was like a 6-year ordeal to get that done and working with the county, but that got put in. Things like adding additional bike racks, we improved some of the signage, we've had improved phones and phone training. We have a hotspot in each office, so if the internet were to go down, the office can still maintain internet connectivity. Again, all things that I've reported on before, all things that are in your board packet. And this 23-24, we updated our intercom and telephone system. It was kind of a mess at the elementary school, so it did pretty much a rip and replace of the PA system and then also the phones. We cordoned off an area at the elementary school so cars, put that big swing gate in so cars can't get back during the school day. On an unsafe, evacuation drills, things like that, more procedural than physical. And then here we are to this year. So again, these two actually go together. Parking lot safety at the middle school, reconfigure the parking lot, and then improve recess area. Those two things kind of go together. Again, as the board knows, we're looking at trying to kind of separate the parking area that we have for kids and our bus area, or parking area that we have for staff, our bus area, and where kids play. So we want to really kind of divide those two areas out. Have cars on one side, kids on the other side. So we're working on a plan for that. This is where that blue shading comes in. So the additional visitor management system, back when we implemented this plan, we had a visitor management system called Raptor, and it required our secretaries to do a lot of interaction with each visitor. And the issue was we'd get lots of visitors at one time that were coming for a volunteer activity or class parties or things like that. And to run them through the Raptor system, we only had one. It was taking a really long time, and only one secretary had the ability to do it because there was only one system. So at the time we created this, the secretaries were like, hey, can we get a second system in the office so we can kind of divide and conquer? And so what ended up happening is we actually abandoned Raptor and went to another system, Mercata, thank you. And it's completely self-sustaining, that the secretaries don't really have to do anything. People come in, They click that they're a visitor, it takes their picture, it runs their ID, it monitors, it does the background check and all of that. And so the secretaries don't really have to do much other than make sure they're kind of monitoring, the alerts that may come up on their computer and, kind of addressing anything that comes up there. So I made that blue because it's really not something that's applicable to this plan anymore. There were some additional safety, kind of things that we did as a result of just circumstances in the world. So we have 3M shatter-resistant sheeting on windows. We have a phase process for that. We installed large planter bollards in front of both schools. We learned, fortunately, in Louisiana that sometimes a vehicle can be used as a weapon, so we want to make sure that that doesn't happen here. So kind of acting as a barrier to some of, where people could, to our entrance points. We did put a double buzz system, which is also part of improving interior and exterior doors, fobs, magnets, things like that. But a double buzz system, so if someone were in the office, once you're in the office, and I think all of you guys have been in our schools, that you're kind of locked in the office until someone buzzes you into the academic area. So all kind of, I'll call them off-plan improvements that we made, just because, again, every time one of these terrible incidents happens somewhere in the country, we learn something, right? And we should have done, we don't want that to happen here, so we're going to implement, this particular safety, either kind of physical safety piece or process or procedure. So we also work at making sure we have the right cyber safety for our students. So this year we implemented Go Guardian on our iPads, which gives us a much more granular control over the apps that are on our devices. They really limit where kids can go on the internet much better, whether they're on our Wi-Fi or whether they're on someone else's in their home Wi-Fi. We really locked down these devices to truly just be for academics and not necessarily visiting some of those darker places on the web. We also have this Jamf Protect, which what it does is essentially it protects our laptops from malware, from some of the kind of more nefarious bad actors that may try and get control over our system. And then we also do our own phishing simulations. So we work with an outside company that sends, I'm sure all of you have gotten the Geek Squad email where they're telling you that they billed you $372 and you have to pay it immediately. We try and do kind of our own version of that, maybe not Geek Squad, to see how many people actually click on it, how many people actually put their email address in, or financial information, or social security number, whatever the phishing scam is asking for. I should say phishing simulation. We do not we do not do scams, we do simulations. In addition, we also kind of have this philosophy of anticipation, education, detection, reaction, and resilience. So we run regular network, I'm going to just read what I have, regular network scans from outside the organization looking for unexpected open addresses and supports or ports where bad guys can get in. Again, we look at education, so from that phishing simulation that we do, we kind of look at all of the people that clicked on it, or, we know who they are. And we go and say, hey, let's talk about this. What happened here? And, oh, you thought, like, next time, here's how you should be a little bit more discerning. And in fairness, I clicked on it, and James came and talked to me and said, why did you click on that thing? And, so we then have that education piece of, like, come on, old guy, don't do that thing that you just did. And James is really, really good about working with our staff and making sure that they feel empowered to know the difference between something that is real and something that is a scam. We run a number for detection of monitoring tools to respond in live time to a range of threats. If we were to be hacked and someone were to kind of take down our system, we have backups, and we can be back up and running within 48 hours. So James and his team have done a really nice job making sure that we have the proper backups in place, that while it definitely would be concerning, we would be able to continue normal operating procedures within 48 hours. And then resilience, continue to build a culture of security and awareness with the goal of embedding security, privacy, and safety into everything we do, and continue training with staff, continue training with making sure students have their kind of cyber safety lessons and things like that. So I do have a quote, but also want to talk a little bit about next steps. So once we've finished, at the end of the year, we'll have finished our plan. What we'll do is we're going to bring Paul Tim back in, and we're going to start this process again. So he'll come in, he'll do an audit, he'll do an assessment, he'll issue a report, we'll bring the committee back together. Won't necessarily be the same committee. Many of the parents and kids have graduated, or employees may have retired or no longer be here. So we'll kind of bring a new committee, get some fresh blood into that committee, and create another 3-year plan, and then just start chipping away at that plan.
Can I put up for consideration thinking about using a different person?
So other than Tim? Or
You said
Paul
we've
Tim?
used them, this would be the 4th round, right? So
Yeah.
we've used them for 3 times, and I think there may be value in a new set of eyes.
Sure.
I mean, they're looking,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I gotta figure out who that would be. He's kind of like the
right.
the
Right, no, I think
Monsanto
I sent
Monsanto
you-
of school safety, if you will, but
But I think there's a few IDPH work with, and we've talked
Yeah,
about
and
different
West 40 too.
presentations. Right. So I don't know. I think there might be value in just
Sure.
thinking about an outside person and a new perspective. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks that, but
Fair
might
enough.
be something
idea.
worth considering.
Yeah.
And then along the lines with the cyber one, with all the letters under education, and you already kind of said it, but we do education for students as well.
Yeah.
I think you said, okay.
Yeah. Our Ricky Simons, and then also our tech intervention coach will go in and do lessons. Megan Babolko will go in
I was
and
like,
do
wait,
lessons.
tech intervention
Yeah,
coach?
yeah, we have a tech,
Yeah,
kind of a tech coach. He'll go
Yeah.
in and do
Okay.
cyber safety lessons with the kids from kindergarten all the way through. And I think actually, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we that was one of our strategic plan goals, is to create that cyber safety roadmap by grade level, and all of the different skills that we're teaching the kids, but all the different safety pieces that we're teaching as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Cool, thanks guys.
Thank you.
All right. Safe.
Next is item 5C, parent student handbook.
All right, so each year, building administrators convene a committee of parents and teachers to review the student-parent handbook, and parents to review the student-parent handbook. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss any changes to the handbook that are required by law or board policy. The changes to the handbook are highlighted in your board packet and reflect suggested changes based on model handbook distributed by the Illinois Principals Association that align with our press policies, and also align with any new laws that may have come on the books since the last year that we did. So I'm turn it over to Kathleen, who kind of leads up this initiative, and she'll walk us through some of the changes.
Like y'all have been sitting a long time. If it was in the elementary, we'd do a go noodle. So if you need to stand up at all during this presentation, I get it. We've been sitting a long time. But thank you for having me. I'm actually here on behalf of myself and Dr. Arundel, who was also very instrumental in pulling this together. So as Dr. Pelzet said, our handbook is a very comprehensive document, as you saw in your board packet over the past several years. We've been reviewing it, we update it yearly to reflect, as again Dr. Pelzet said, our current practices, policies, and any new laws that may have been enacted. As you will see, the changes reflected in our proposed 25-26 handbook. The majority of the changes continue to be very minor in nature. The recommended additions come from the Illinois Principal Association Model School Handbook, and these additions include legal updates and suggestions based upon the laws enacted within the state of Illinois over the past year. The Model School Handbook verbiage also aligns with press, again, as Dr. Pelzet said, and their recommended updates. So just a little process overview. It's a 3-step process. The handbook is read by administrators, staff, and a parent representative. Thank you, Lindsay Hosanna. A meeting then occurred we utilize the Illinois Principal Association Model School Handbook, those recommendations. And our committee, which consists of Lindsay Hosanna is a PTO member, Cara Mulder, kindergarten teacher, myself, Dr. Arundel, Miss Raleigh, the middle school assistant principal, and Miss Bisenko from the middle school. We met on December 2nd to review all of those edits and any changes that we thought would enhance the clarity of the document. And then we work, Dr. Arundel and I pull all of that together and we present it to you, that's tonight, for review and approval. So there's really 3 categories of changes. The most meaningful changes included the addition of new language. And so there were 4 areas with new language. Again, these come from the Illinois Principal Association Model School Handbook and in alignment with the press. So these sections are section 2.10, free and reduced price food services meal charge notification. That simply outlines eligibility requirements for free and reduced price meals, including communication practices from the business offices regarding negative balances. Next section, 6.30, student behavior. This was previously named student discipline. It contains much of the same information, though a statement was added that the rules apply during periods of remote learning. In addition, it identifies 22 examples of misconduct and 14 examples of potential disciplinary measures. Also, a statement about corporal punishment was added, as well as a section on the prohibition of both weapons and gang activity.
Just to clarify, regarding corporal punishment,
We don't do it. Yes, and that's what this statement is that
No.
it's not permitted at all. It's just
Just
law.
for
Doesn't
those
matter.
watching at home.
Yep. Section 6.42, discrimination and harassment on the basis of race, color, and national origin is prohibited. Again, Public Act 103-472, the Racism Free Schools Act, requires school districts to have a separate policy on discrimination and harassment on the basis of race, color, and national origin. So this is simply moved into its own section. And then finally, section 10.70, PUNS, which stands for the prioritization of urgency of need of services. This is a new section informing families of a resource from the Illinois Department of Human Services, which may provide individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities with additional services outside of the school setting based on available funding. Any questions so far? Okay, so then the second category of updates included added or revised language to existing sections, which simply reflect current mandates, laws, or press alignment. Some of these examples, you have them all in your redlined copy. Some of these examples are 1.40, visitors and volunteers. It simply added language outlining prohibited behavior of visitors and volunteers, including smoking, use of obscene language, use or distribution of alcohol, cannabis, or other unlawful products or drugs. And they cannot possess weapons, things like that. Section 5.10, immunizations, health, eye, dental examination. We added a line about the exclusionary requirements for undocumented immunity to measles. So students or staff that have undocumented immunity to measles, they have to be excluded for 21 days since the date of last exposure. 6.40, prevention of and response to bullying, intimidation, and harassment. Again, language was just added and modified to align with press and the current parent-guardian notification requirements. And then finally, 12.110, sex offender notification law. This just simply consolidated information about the Illinois State Police website, including offender registries and FAQs. Any questions here? Okay. So then the third section, the final category of updates, included updates to reflect our current practices, simple grammar edits, and updates to reflect current staff or new board members. Again, some of these examples, the one I really want to point out is this first one, 1.95, communication. And so we added information about student access and, we added information about pickup patrol. And so this is the language, this is not in your copy, but was a recommendation that came to us. And so I put the whole addition there so that you can see that. We'll add in a section on pickup patrol that says elementary school parents or guardians report student dismissal plans and absences via pickup patrol. Information on how to access pickup patrol is available at the start of the school year and through our front office. To ensure students are correctly dismissed, pickup patrol must have a default plan assigned to each student. Parents and guardians must update pickup patrol when there are changes to this default plan. For example, getting picked up versus taking the bus home, or attending an after-school club, extending extra events. That was a good suggestion, thank you. Couple other changes we made, section 4.10, bus transportation, we added a statement about elementary students and that their iPads and personal electronic devices are to remain often in their backpacks while on the bus. 4.20, we just clarified the process. Again, we added something about pickup patrol and clarified the process for leaving around the back of the school and coming up front for drop off and pickup. And 4.20, we have cafeteria rules and procedures edited to reflect current recess practices for determining indoor and outdoor recess, and those temperature guidelines. Any questions there?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
For my own knowledge on the bus transportation, so with the iPads, like, I noticed middle school is silenced, elementary is off, and so I'm sure
Right.
there's a rationale behind that. I was just curious what.
They're younger.
Yeah.
They get dropped off them on the bus when they're out. Sometimes we'll have students that are like taking pictures of others and then they'll, swirl them. And so we just want this young age not to limit their access to it. It's really an instructional tool is our intention for the iPads. And so on the bus is a good time to talk to one another, to have that human connection. So we want them off of their iPads.
Thank you.
So once again, our handbook is a comprehensive document. It's clear that many hours have been spent reflecting on the practices, expectations, and legal mandates required in a parent school handbook and aligning these to the school board policy. So thank you to all of those that helped work on this year and previous years. Again, thank you to the committee, making sure that it's up to date and reflects our practices. Thank you much.
No quote.
No quote, no. I did look. It's hard to find a quote on a handbook.
I'll help you with that next.
Next is item 5B, the audit report.
All right, to ensure that our business, office, and financial practices meet current accounting practices and standards, the district engages an independent auditor to review our books. The audit revealed that our practices and procedures are aligned with best practice, and we should continue with many of our current systems. The audit also revealed that no additional controls are needed. We have a member from our auditing team, Vicar Tilly, who will present the audit's outcome. So, Anna, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. Yes, thank you. I will briefly be highlighting the more important aspects of the audit. If anyone has any questions regarding any parts of the audit, please stop me at any time. First off, I just want to say thank you to Griffin and the entire business office for making the audit go smoothly again this year. Very responsive to all of our requests, so thank you for that. I think everyone was provided with in the board packet. There's 5 different reports. The main one, which I will focus on, is the annual comprehensive financial report. So this is great news. This year, the district elected to change the presentation of the financial statements, and we have issued an annual comprehensive financial report. The difference between what the normal standard financial statements and the ACFR is that it has 4 additional sections: the transmittal letter, organizational chart, listing of principal officers and advisors, and statistical tables, which are found at the end of the financial statements. So what's going to happen, actually, the district will be able to apply for an award, and if granted an award, this award will be included in next year's financial statements. Okay, and just kind of provide some of overall financial highlights. On page 1 is our independent auditor's report. We have issued an unmodified opinion over the district's financial statements. This is the highest level of assurance that can be obtained from your auditor, and it means that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects and contain all required disclosures, so it's a clean audit. We also talk about the division of responsibility. Management is responsible for presentation of the financial statements and implementation and maintenance of internal controls. The auditor responsibility includes obtaining reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. We did not implement any new GASBs this year. If we did, that would be called out in our opinion. As far as the financial statements, I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about the statement of revenues and expenditures, which is found on pages 17 and 18. All of the fund balances remain positive. In terms of the general fund had an increase in fund balance of $1.5 million. The remaining operating funds had nominal decreases. So O&M, transportation, and IMRF had slight decreases in fund balance, but the fund balances remain positive, and district is continuing to meet the recommendation of 50% minimal fund balance policy for the fiscal year 24. In terms of the debt service and capital projects fund, the capital projects fund, as Griffin talked about, had a transfer of $600,000 from the operations and maintenance fund, and this is fund balance remaining in that fund is at $1.3 million. The other report I'm going to briefly talk about is the annual financial report, which is a regulatory basis report filed with the Illinois State Board of Education. We have also issued a clean opinion on the AFR. The district is continuing to be receiving a score of 4, which puts them in the recognition status. Strong cash position, solvency position was achieved, strong fund balance to revenue ratio, and strong expenditure to revenue ratio as well. And lastly, the report I wanted to bring up is the reporting insights letter, which is kind of our management letter, which if we found any issues with internal control, we will talk about them in here. I'm happy to report that we found no issues, and the district's internal controls remain strong. That's kind of all I had to report. If anyone has any questions.
What page did you say our score was found, the 4 that you said?
That's in the annual financial report. This one here, and it's towards the beginning.
Oh. Great.
Other questions? All right. Table auditor doesn't have any questions. I think we're in good shape.
Straightforward. I mean, that's basically everything you want to hear.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so can I get a motion that the Board of Education accepts the fiscal year 2024 audit report as presented?
So moved, but, is it matter what the name?
No.
Okay, so that's okay, oh, yeah, okay, so, yeah.
I'll fix that.
Oh, I just didn't know if it
Oh.
mattered, okay, yep, so moved.
Second.
Mr. Braca?
Yes.
Mrs. London? Yes. Mr. Nash?
Yes.
Mrs. Walters? Yes. Mr. Zona?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Marchion? Yes. All right, so next we'll move on to item 6, which is item for the next agenda, which include facility development update, declassified closed session minutes, board policy 485, cost analysis for programs, review governance and planning, section 1 board policies, and preliminary staffing projections and recommendations. Questions, concerns? Okay. Next we'll move to item 7, open forum. Doesn't appear we have anyone to approach the board. Item 8, sure. Okay. Oh,
So you just need a
Oh.
motion and then a voice vote.
Oh. We haven't closed out.
I know.
like a regular
So
meeting. So can we get a
7:31.
motion?
So moved?
Second?
A motion?
Oh.
And then it's
And then-
voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Done.
I'll work